Okay, so we're not doing those.
All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We are glad to be here. It's our last class. I was waiting for the collective. For those of you online, if you want to send in your emoticons and all those good things, we're glad to be here. Our clicker works today. We've got that figured out for our PowerPoint, so things are progressing here as the semester goes on and comes up to wrapping up. And we have Dave here, who's on a red-eye flight from California. He was with admissions doing some things, so he's awake.
He dozes off, it's not me. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So it's a good day to be together, a good day to learn. Today we talk about emotional intelligence and ministry. And if you listen to bishops and synod offices and folks that are out there working in the field of ministry, today you will see more and more workshops on emotional intelligence, saying that it seems like 80% of what they're doing is tending to emotional intelligence issues in leadership. And so understanding how God has uniquely wired each one of us and flooded us, gifted us with all of these feelings and emotions. And what does it mean to be a leader in the Christian church and to know yourself well and to understand the emotional landscape, not only of yourself, but also of others. So we're going to journey into that today. I don't know if turning a crock pot on in the morning so your roast is done when you get home at 5 o'clock is part of emotional intelligence. If it is, I don't have it. So I'm starting to wonder if you can microwave a roast when I get home later today. That'll be kind of fun to figure out. Maybe deep fry it. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you for the sympathy. I might. So as we go about our days and busyness and all the things that are going to distract us, like my roast, we are going to just take a moment to pause and reflect and begin to focus on emotional intelligence. So let's open with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Living God, we breathe in your breath. Your Spirit is among us. We thank you for places such as this, places to gather, to think critically, to listen. Pray, Lord, that you would open our eyes and our ears, our hearts in new ways today as we think about our own emotional landscape, the understandings within each one of us, how you have uniquely gifted each one of us, and how you might empower us as well for doing ministry in this world. We thank you for this gift. We thank you for the opportunity to learn from one another. Open our ears to the wisdom in this room, this place that we gather. In Jesus' name. Amen. Then I'm going to invite Professor Sherry Elton to come forward and get us started.
So I'm going to invite you to think about something, or invite you for the next hour and a half to be selfish. All right? And what I mean by that is, I know you got papers to do. I got a couple to grade, some of yours. Right, Tim? Yeah, anyway. I know you got assignments coming down, things at home, maybe church stuff going on. But I want to invite you to just lean into this hour not as, like, you can pass this class by not incorporating anything of this into your final paper tomorrow. That's it, right? Or whatever. But I want you to think through the lens of, what do I need to hear today? Some of you, most of you, are in early on your seminary journey here. And you have been thrown at all kinds of stuff at you all semester, right? Here's new vocabulary, really big words that sometimes the, little red line shows up on. Missional never is gonna be in the dictionary, but you're gonna use it a lot, for example. But I want you to just think about, I came here, right, to seminary as a leader with some competencies, and I'm gonna gain some here and I'm gonna use some later in my life, but I want you to hear through emotional intelligence. What is it, where are you in this emotional intelligence journey? Tim and Dave and I don't know Erica, I just am getting to know Erica, I don't wanna put anything on her, would admit we're still on this journey, right? She's maybe got it all figured out, yeah. She's got preschoolers, little kids. But in this, I think there are very few times that without a candidacy committee breathing down our necks, or a grade on the line, or a call committee, or a review committee, or just people that you're preaching to where they're going to evaluate you, whatever, to just breathe and say, I need to fill me. I need to think about who I am in this. Deal? Is that kind of the spirit of where we're going? All right. Emotional intelligence. What the heck is it? Good place to start? Okay, we're gonna have to up the energy a little bit if we're gonna make it to the next, right? No. Okay, yes, let's talk about what it is. Emotional intelligence is basically this: how leaders handle themselves and their relationships. Now, I don't know, but I've been watching the news. Anybody else watching the news? A few people could use some emotional intelligence right now, I'm thinking. Many of them in leadership positions, right? All right. And this is like way below, what's appropriate to do with, women or men, or what, this isn't boundaries workshop. This is really even more basic. How do leaders handle themselves and their relationships? That's what emotional intelligence is, okay? Why attend to it? So there's, Daniel Goleman is kind of the emotional intelligence guy, okay? That's the person most known for it. And he's got a book on it. This is the second wave kind of his research, and it's called Primal Leadership. It's where he works with some other people, and that's what we're gonna mainly talk about, is some of the things from here. But one of the things that they say is, why tend to this, they say for emotions, emotional intelligence is really primal. It's really basic to who we are. And why attend to it? And they say 4 things. They claim that the emotional task of a leader is the most important one. Now think about that. When's a time when you've encountered a leader where the emotions have either been really helpful or really bad? Can you give me some examples? You can come online too. Dave will shout them out for us. When's a time when it's been really good or really bad in their emotional way of leading? You can share them. What's an example? And ever been in a really conflicted situation where the leader kind of turned the temperature down so it didn't explode, right? You got one, okay.
Yeah, so at the camp that we used to go to.
Sorry, we forgot the microphone. Right. Thank you, Tim.
So at the camp that we used to bring our confirmation kids to, on Thursday nights, we would just let them kind of talk about how Jesus had impacted them that week and what had been going on in their lives and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one year in particular, it got like real dark. Like the kids went into some really dark places, and the leader did a really good job of keeping of respecting what they were saying, but shifting the attitude
Awesome.
to get us out of that downward
Yeah.
cycle.
Well, awesome to do in general, right? But then with young people,
Yeah.
right? On that kind of height point of camp can really spiral, can it? Right? Excellent example. Anybody else have one? Anybody online, Dave?
Yeah, we got some.
Oh, good.
Yes, and online we have somebody saying a CEO told the whole company what he thought without any boundaries at all, and this woman, Vicky, ended up leaving within months after that.
Saying not a good move.
Not a good move.
Lack of emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Right? So a good example, right? And kind of a toxic almost, it sounds like, right? So thank you. I might ask you for other examples. Keep thinking, all right? So the emotional task of a leader is the most important. Second, and these two gave a great example, the leader's act can guide the emotionals of the group, right? And the group can be, like the whole camp, right? It could be a small group of campers or a small group of students or small group Bible study or whatever. It could also be the whole company, right? With the CEO. My husband came home last night. He's the director of mission outreach. And right now at our church, we have a number of Christmas projects. You know what I mean? Like take a gift off, tag off the tree, go get a gift, bring it back kind of things, right? And it's interesting because the group, it's all volunteer led. We have a staff that kind of works with them, is kind of spiraling toxically, right? They're just kind of complaining. And so the last couple of weeks, my husband goes like, it's going from bad to worse. And the staff person that's working with this doesn't know how to do it, right? How to turn it. She's not the issue, but she's just not sure kind of what to do. So an example of that. So you're the guide and you can sway it, right? Which these examples were great examples of. And listen to this. In the book here, it says, emotional intelligence contributes 80 to 90% of the competencies that distinguish this. Good or great leaders. Okay? In the book, Good to Great, some of you may know about that. It's from the business world. They look at the leadership quality of those. And they said, they put those two studies together. They said the difference between just being average, competent, but, and being a good, excellent leader. That bar changes most dramatically because of emotional intelligence. So here's the deal. You can do really good in all these pastoral gifts, capacities, or leadership in a nonprofit or some kind of specialized ministry that you might be called to. And if you don't have emotional intelligence, maybe the best you can be is average. Okay, that's maybe oversimplifying it. But it's that powerful. It's like a superfood, It's a multiplier if you can attend to this. Now, here's my hunch. You're already well on your way. You probably didn't get here without doing this work. That makes sense? So you're already in the race. You already might be really good at it. But this is not something that you're now done with. You have to kind of continually attend to it as we go. So that's what we're going to talk about, how to do that. Is it my thing? Sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Sorry. The price of being beautiful. Okay, I'm just kidding. I knew that was just not going to sound right, but I'm like, whatever. Yeah. I could just walk around the microphone as my accessory all day. All right, so if it's tending to yourself and tending to your relationships, this is kind of the 4 domains that come out of that, right? It's a little matrix. So self, that's you, up and down, right? And social is your relationships. Are you following me? If you're online, nod. Okay, thank you. I'm just kidding. I'm pretending I can see you. And then it's recognize and regulate. So self, thinking of myself and recognizing it, right? Do I have self-confidence? How do I present myself? I could come to you today and I could go like, I really don't really know what I'm talking about, right? You probably wouldn't jump in to this lecture in the same kind of way as if I'm like, I am so excited about today. This is going to be awesome, right? Right? So you know what? Fake it till you make it. CPE tip of the day. Scared, crazy to go into that first room. I remember when I had to do that in my pastoral care thing, and I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. Don't look like you're sweating and, you know, whatever. Go in and listen and, you know, use what you got. So self-confidence. But the other thing is emotional self-awareness. Any of you tired in the last couple weeks? Yeah, okay. Amen, right? When I'm tired, I'm less aware of my emotions. Anybody else like that? A little more raw, right? And so I can like, okay, I'm tired, I'm fine, you know, and then I go into a class or I go into a preset group or I go into a meeting and things get a little tense. And all of a sudden my emotions just like, boom, I'm like, where did that come from? Right? I'm just tired. And they hit a chord, and normally I'd be more self-aware and I could say, bite your tongue before you say something, Terry, right? And that filter went to sleep. It's taken a nap, right? And so emotional self-awareness is a sense of, for me, my trigger is when I'm tired after a long day. I walk in the house and what's happening with my family, right? Or my husband, my daughter, and they say something and then I go, am I gonna react or am I gonna filter this, right? Because I'm tired. My brain is someplace else or whatever, and if I'm not conscious of it, it can come out sideways. But it's also the sense of, is this joy? Is this, you know, positive, right? There's all kinds of things on that sense, all right? Accurate self-assessment. Now here's the trick, right? I can read a meeting. Tim and I were in a meeting yesterday. I was online. That makes it complicated, right? But I can read a meeting, and Tim can read a meeting, and we maybe aren't reading it the same, right? Emotionally, of what was going on. And so sometimes it's like, all right, I need a mirror with regard to that. Am I reading a situation? I have been, I find myself sometimes in dysfunctional systems working. Any of you? Okay. Sometimes it happens in the church. And when I'm tired or broken down, I often get to a place and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm reading this accurately. And I know in those places, I need to stop and ask some questions. Like, I left that meeting yesterday and was kind of depressed for the rest of the evening.
I bet you want to know what this meeting was about.
It wasn't yesterday.
Oh.
No. Sorry, I'm deviating now because otherwise I'm making it sound like it was awful. No, but I'm thinking sometimes then I need to check back with somebody else. Now in my family, this is how it works. Well, an event will happen. I know none of your families are like that. Some weird happens in the family event. Let's say it's a Thanksgiving gathering or whatever, and we go back and we're like, that was great, except that one weird thing. And then our family members or my husband and I, whatever, we're like, what was that thing? This is how I felt. I felt angry. Did you feel angry or confused or whatever? Do you know what I'm saying about this? We need people to check with us to make sure we're reading it right. Okay? Or I was upset. Did I have a right to be upset? Or am I being oversensitive? That's an example. So self-confidence, emotional awareness, and then accurate self-assessment. Now let's go over to the social side, right? So let's say we were in that same family gathering, and rather than feel like I was hurt by it, this would be, you know what, I'm in a fine place. I wonder what was going on with my brother to make him act that way, right? It's the empathy, it's the wondering what else is going on. For me, now, Are any of you, like on the spiritual gifts, have empathy as your, now, I got nothing in that category. I'm just saying, right? But that doesn't mean I get out of being empathetic, but it doesn't come naturally. Those of you that have that, this might come very naturally for you. Even when your, you know, kind of self side is kind of low, you probably still have really good ways to navigate it. For me, when I'm low, like I got nothing. All right. And so I have had to have people help me in this area because I don't have natural gifts there. But I'm in ministry, right? I better figure it out. And it doesn't mean I'm paralyzed. It just means it's an area I've had to think about, right? I am driven by ideas, and I can just go right over people, and then they'll go, Terry, stop. Do you understand that half those people were like sad because of this thing happened? I'm like, oh, it didn't occur to me to think about that, right? I mean, it's not my first bend. Okay, so empathy, organizational awareness. Last year, we had some staff cuts that were in the area that affected students, right? And the biggest complaint that I heard was the lack of organizational awareness of how this would impact the community. It was less about maybe this is the right decision or not. That's not our call. But being aware of the ripple effect of what this had and then tending to it, right? The complaint, if you will, fell in that level, all right? Finally, service orientation. All right, I can have empathy, right, for another individual. I can watch the organization, and then I can do something about it, right? So what would that mean? How would I jump in, you know, what would it call me to do? How could I help? So it's action. Are you with me? Does this kind of make sense? Now, most of us do this without saying, am I doing a service orientation right now? Am I organizationally aware, right? We don't put these categories, but I bet you do this, right? So recognition, self and social. Now regulation, and we've already been kind of talking about this. So I'm tired. I know I'm not fully self-aware. So I might have to have self-control and just say, you're tired, just don't talk in this meeting unless absolutely necessary. Keep your mouth shut, right? I'm a verbal processor. That may not surprise any of you. It won't surprise these guys, right? And so sometimes I don't know what I think until I say it. Anybody like me? All right, good. All right, good. And so sometimes that gets me into trouble because I think we're brainstorming or whatever, and somebody else, it hurts them. It feels like it's their work is tied up in it or whatever. So self-control is ability for me to turn it off or regulate my own behavior in a bit. So this morning, I hadn't gotten up I usually work out in the morning. I hadn't done that for a couple days, and I really did not want to get up at 5:15 this morning. I really would have rather slept in. However, I knew that I had a very long day, and I knew that this would be day 3 in a row that I hadn't, and I knew that at 9 o'clock tonight, I would wish I would have gotten up at 5 o'clock, right? I've done this before, I have a pattern. So my self-control was, when the alarm went off, I hit snooze and I said, get out of bed. And I got out of bed, right? That's self-control. My body, my mind was lazy, you know, but here's the deal. For me, I'm better with self-control when I have habits, when I have some kind of patterns that I've done, right? When I can learn. So there are practices that we develop in this self-management, self-regulation area, okay? Are you following me so far how this works? I'm not gonna go through all of them, but just, now in relationship management, you as a Christian public leader in certain situations have more influence than you maybe think you do. You might say, I'm just a seminary student doing my little 10 hours a week or whatever, helping out. But you know what? To that confirmation student or to that mom or that farmer or that whoever, you're a seminary student, right? And so when you say something, it has power, especially if you're in a Bible study, because you're supposed to know stuff about the Bible, right? And so one of the things for us to think about, one of the things we want you to think about as a Christian public leader is it's one thing to do this work just as your own person, right? In your relationships with your friends or your family or whoever you're working with. It's another thing to do this when you step in and you have now this thing called Christian public leader, whatever that role is, whatever that piece is, right? It's one of the reasons I don't always tell people on a plane what I do. I mean, I start by telling them I teach, and if they push me, I finally tell them. But then I know that somehow I have a spiritual leadership thing, and I got to think about my conversation differently, right? Not because I'm ever going to see them again, but because for them, I don't know what their experience is with other Christian public leaders. They've maybe been hurt by them. They maybe don't think women should be one, right? They maybe think all Lutherans are weird, and now I'm a Lutheran, and you know, they're suspicious. I don't know, right? So, all right, so these are the 4 domains that they're looking at. So here are the 5 keys. I apologize for this really lack of whatever. So I'm gonna hit the button a lot. So these are stepping stones, right? You start by being self-aware, all right? And you do some work there. And then you work to self-regulation, right? I'm aware. Now when I hit those situations, I can make some choices, right? Other people may be angry, but I don't have to be angry, right? Or other people are anxious, I don't have to be anxious. So that's self-regulation. Then there's motivation. What is it internally that's going to motivate you? Like for me, I needed motivation to get out of bed this morning. Right? So what internally, what not, there's external motivation and internal motivation. What is it internally that's going to get me to get my butt out of bed and go do it? Okay? How do you find that out? Empathy. How do you then put yourself in somebody else's place? And then how do you then have the social skills to do that with the community? So these kind of build on each other. All right, so it's kind of this often for us, we go from self-awareness to social skill, right? We kind of collapse them, but there's different pieces along the way. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those. When you can do each of these, what are the fruits? All right, that's what I mean. I'm sorry about that. There we go. Oh, cow. Let's try it again. What happened? There we go. We need it. We need a little. Dun, 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 dun. Yes. There we go. Okay. What are the fruits of self-awareness? When I'm self-aware, I have self-confidence. I have a realistic sense of who I am. I'm not defensive, and my humor isn't making fun of me. Right? We've talked about a number of these, but let me talk about being non-defensive. You will not always be a good preacher or a good pastoral care or lead a good Bible study or whatever your ministry leading. You're just not gonna. Is that new news for anybody? All right. And you're not gonna get it all right, especially at the beginning. So how can you know your gifts, know where your learning is, and go into a situation, even when you've got gifts and competencies, and take critique, take input, without getting all uptight about it, right? I'm an okay teacher, and I like doing it, I'm passionate about it, but I sometimes do have really bad classes, and often I have sessions that don't go as at least I intended, right? If I'm not open to hearing feedback from how people received it, I'm not going to grow the capacity of being a good teacher, which I think is part of what God's called me to do. So part of my non-defensiveness is that I don't have to protect myself. In fact, opening myself for that helps me grow. So that's kind of an example. Now we get to do this again. Self-regulation. When I can not let my emotions just be on my sleeve and regulate and take over the room, right? When I can kind of turn the temperature up or down, control them as I need to, I get to walk into relationships and be much more trustworthy. I get to be known as a person of integrity or not, if I can't, right? I can live a little bit more with ambiguity, right? When things don't go exactly as we imagine, and I'm much more open to change. Now think about this today. Do we have to do change in the church? Do we have to do change in the nonprofit world? We do. Do synod offices and denominational work have to change?
Oh, they're good.
Check. Okay. Whoosh. So go work there if you don't want to change, right? Here's the thing. If we don't have this ability, this is going to be so threatening. And I think we know this, but right now this might take a lot of energy. More than we even had anticipated. And here's the deal, I'm going to tell you a secret. Bishops, senior pastors, CEOs, CFOs, they have to work on this as much as you do, and I do. Just because you're in a higher position or just because you've been at this longer doesn't mean you've got this all figured out. In fact, you may be called to lead way out of your comfort zone, and it's really challenging. So give a little empathy, right? But it also suggests why this is so important. So guess what? We're going to go to the next one. So motivation. What is the fruit of dealing with motivation? I don't know how we got there twice. All right. Anybody think some of seminary's been a little hard, or you've been in places you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this class? Anybody? Yeah, right? Looking at the reading list, looking at the concepts, looking at one more exegetical paper, really, I don't know what it is, right? If there's not an internal drive, it's so easy to just give up, right? I give many of our online students credit because there are days when we're on campus that I feel really down and I can sit down at a lunchroom and open myself up and have a conversation, and maybe I find a new friend because we're like, oh, I am so with you right there, right? They can help me, right, gain that. But when you're like North Pole, Alaska, is Mary still on? Hi, Mary. Or Colombia, we have a student in Colombia, South America, right? And you feel really far from all of your colleagues and all this work, and all you see is deadlines. It's hard to stay motivated, right? And so where's that drive gonna come, right? How are you gonna, when you get a bad thing on a test or when there's some challenge in ministry, where's you gonna say, where's the hope come from? I'm gonna get up and do this again. Where's that gonna come from? Now, I'm kind of thinking that some of us are going like, well, I'm here because I'm called. I really would like to do something else that might even pay better or have better hours or something. This internal motivation might come from you just holding on to the Holy Spirit. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean, this may come as you stay connected to the creator of the universe that created you in a particular way. And you say, God, I got nothing. Fill me today. That's not in the book, by the way. But I think that's where, for us, This isn't all like pull up your bootstraps, you got to do it on your own. We are part of something bigger than ourselves. Empathy. This section would be like 5 minutes shorter if anyway, we're just gonna go to the next one. Okay. Have empathy. We'll get to it in a minute. It'll come up again. If we self-aware, self-regulate, motivate, learn how to be empathetic, we suddenly have a set of external skills, like this internal thing flows out of us to lead communities in particular ways. You're gonna have to persuade people. You're gonna have to lead change. You're gonna have to build teams. You're gonna have to say, this team, we're gonna go from I have no clue to this vision, and you're gonna have to figure out a path together, right? Where are those skills gonna come from? They're gonna come from this ground that you've been tilling and working on, right? That's where it flows out of you. Okay, see, there we go. The fruits of these are there. See, one of the things I wanna highlight since we didn't talk about empathy is next semester, many of you will be in CPL2. And you want to give a shout out? Woo woo! It's Dave's favorite CPL. Like we're not supposed to have favorites, but he does, right, Dave? Yeah. So in ministry, we're called into all kinds of situations where we have to listen to other people and work with that. But we know more and more cultural differences, cultural boundaries. We're going to have to cross out of our comfort zone in so many ways. We can't just read people in the same way that we feel. And so for us, even before we get to the leading the change, that's one of the fruits we want you to develop, which is why we give a semester to it. We want you to think about how can you listen to other people and what's going on with them and dance together, not just to say, well, I know what they're thinking, and move forward. Because actually, how you're acting, behaving, presuming might actually be hurting or being an obstacle to your building a relationship and doing ministry with them. All right? So, so one of the things we know, pause, there is a course on leading change. I'm happy to say it will be offered next spring, a year from now, because I just committed to teaching it. Woohoo! It wasn't offered this year, so we try and do it every year. But if you want to take leading change in conflict and go deeper into that, there's an option for you to do that. If you want to more about leading change, the leadership course will be offered as well next year. I'm not sure if it's in the spring this year or not, but there are places to go deeper in this, to give you skills to build on that. But these things kind of bring you up and prepare you, right, to be in those positions. Does that make sense? So, but one of the things that we wanted to leave you with is, because I think this is so connected to emotional intelligence, is how you're able to regulate and be self-aware and empathize with others helps you lead more effectively, more faithfully in conflict. And you are going to face conflict at some point, and we are not good at that in the church. There are a few places that are, but I hear more stories of congregations that don't quite know how to do conflict. It's either really abrasive, or it's passive aggressive, or it's in the off meeting, it's not dealt with in the, in each other together when it happens. So online, posted online, if this is something that you just want to put your toe into this semester, you don't have to do anything for us with it. But I put the conflict EQ test on the website for Moodle, right? You can take it's like 30 questions, it's short. And then you can self-score, and then it'll show you which are your primary. So I'm gonna talk just a little bit about these categories as I end my time here. But no, that's what you can find out where you rank in regard to this. So, so your needs, other needs. So I can lead conflict totally like I'm out of it and I'm just about your needs, right? Or I can be, it's all about me, or we can find some place in the middle. All right. So sometimes I enter into conflict. It's their issue. I'm going to just either avoid it or just change and accommodate. Think of in your mind a time when you've done that. Now, one, it may be you avoided it because it just isn't that important to you, right? Or it may be this is such a pattern, they're not going to change. Or it may be this is so big, I have no clue what to do, right? So there may be good reasons or bad reasons to avoid. We can't deal with every single conflict that comes our way. So sometimes we have to avoid, but if you always avoid, it's probably not a good pattern. Accommodate is similar to that, but it means you're actually changing your behavior. I have an issue within my in-laws side of the family where I get tired that everybody accommodates for one bad set of behaviors. And I try and talk about it, but I'm the outlaw, right? I'm the person that's entered. I can't change it. And so I just pull up my hair, right? But, you know, I'm in this for 26, 27 years. So, you know, I'm not going away, right? But I watch that as the strategy, and it's not healthy ongoing, right? But there are times, right, that I do accommodate intentionally because it's the right response, right? Compete, opposite end, right? We have a conflict, I'm gonna win, right? We're gonna settle this and I'm gonna win. I've done that, anybody, right? My idea is better than yours. Now, usually for me, it's at the idea level, right? But sometimes with my brothers, it's just to compete because they're my brothers, right? That's at the relational level, right? But there are times, right? And now maybe this is a really important thing and you should, right? You should go after it. But maybe that's your competitive nature and it doesn't matter if you win or not, right? Maybe winning the idea, you know, winning the battle loses the war, right? Maybe the consequences of your going so after that idea hurts the relationship. I have seen many people in ministry go after some really good idea, but they just disregarded all the relationality of it, and it didn't matter. They lost the trust of the community, and their time was limited then. They didn't actually get to implement the idea because they lost the people that they're with. So compete, collaborate, all right? I think our team has hit a few moments of conflict and we approach them with collaboration. There's trust there. There's respect for a different gift set, right? And we go, all right, let's back up. Let's say, what do we want to do? What can each person do? We get a way forward and we move, right? But we can do that because we put in a lot of time together. We've learned from each other. We're all mostly, you know, healthy people most days, you know, like you come into the group. And I say that because sometimes you have a functional group, but then you have like one person that's just a spiral down. Sometimes it's hard to collaborate unless everybody's healthy, right? Or self-aware. So collaboration. And collaboration just takes a lot of time. So while collaboration might be your like, I always want to collaborate, it might be, but you may not always have that kind of time. So the step back then is compromise. All right, you've got some needs, I've got some needs, we've got this timeline. How might we work this out in a way to move forward, right? I think for me, many situations in ministry, compromise has been a go-to. Because it's aware of the needs, right? Nobody's winning in that sense, but it does take some negotiating. So is that helpful to just get some pictures? All right, this is the last slide and I'm turning it over to Dave. Look forget the clergy for a minute. This comes from Mark Sunby, who did this session for us last time, who does a lot of work with people in candidacy across all different denominations. So he has kind of statistics on where clergy are, but this is where it comes from, primary leadership. So top executives, they go after conflict with competition, collaboration, accommodating, compromise, and then avoid. Last one is avoid, right? Employees, right? Look at this. It goes from avoiding as the last to the second, right? They're like, hey, I'm not in charge. Somebody else is in charge. They try to win, and then it's like one extreme or the other. Do you see that? And then it's accommodate, compromise, and collaborate is at the end. This is just statistically, right? But now look at clergy, really different mix of ministry leaders, or probably you could say roster leaders, because that's the people that they're working with. Accommodate is the first. Now, there are maybe times when you have to accommodate, but I think it says more about our unwillingness to stick up for some of the values and some of the things that we think are most important, and to hear people out, right? To put people in a room and work it out. Then it's collaborate, avoid, compromise, and compete. Compete is usually at the bottom. Now, there are exceptions to that, but that's it. So anyway, and with that, drum roll. Let's give it to Dave Shear.
All right.
Clicker
and mic without a necklace.
I could give it to you.
Can you all hear me? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Cool. Well, we do a lot of talking to you all, and we want to give you all a chance to try to live into some of this stuff. So first, what we just want to talk about real quick is this iceberg. So if you can see the iceberg here, on the top of this iceberg is work, content, skills, and tendencies. So this is like, maybe you heard us talk about Aristotle with the word techne, like, we give you this technical skill. In the business world, they call it the hard skills, right? So you learn these hard skills. You learn how to, what's an example of a hard skill for a leader in the church?
Welding. Oh, wait, no, wait. That's fixing the toilet.
Balancing a budget. No. But then there's all this stuff that happens under the waterline, right? And these are what the business world calls the soft skills. I think it's the tough skills. It's actually the hard stuff, right? How do you walk into a room and a 4-year-old just passed away? And how do you know what the heck you're doing? Or how do you show up in that space? Those are the skills that are so important. And so what we want eventually is to develop these adaptive tendencies where it becomes a part of our being. We just walk into a room and we embody this thing, and we're not thinking about, okay, use eye contact. Okay, yep, nod knowingly. Okay, we're not thinking that way. We're just saying, I'm going to inhabit this space. I'm going to show up incarnationally, and the Spirit is going to show up with me. That's what we're going for. So I want to do an exercise with you all to help us get there. So what we're going to do is you're going to find a strange person next to you. Sarah, this is your time to partner people off if you hear me or see me waving. Everybody waves to Sarah in the back. So find somebody that you maybe don't know as well. And what you're going to do is you're going to figure out who's A and who's B. Now we could probably do a whole class on how you decide who's A and who's B, right?
I think they might be in 3, so if they're 3, they need a C too.
Oh, they're 3s? Okay. 3s. Yeah, we could try to make 3 work online at least. Okay.
We'll
okay.
see what happens.
But at least live in the room, just find one other person. And what you're going to do is you're going to listen to the other person at 50% attentiveness. Only 50%. So what's going to happen is
That won't be hard for some.
exactly. So we do this all the time, right? We listen at 50%. So Tim, tell me real quick about what you did yesterday.
Well, I was here at work and I was trying to have a meeting with you, but I seemed
Oh,
to
sorry.
be distracted.
Sorry, were you saying something? My bad, dude. I was just checking. Okay. Okay. Let's do 40-ish%, 40 to 50%. Okay. So you're gonna listen to the other person for a minute, and they're going to talk about their favorite Christmas tradition in their family. A is going to talk to B. You get 1 minute to talk. Now, we're going to have the listening police. Tim and I and maybe Erica are going to be checking. We're going to make sure that you're not listening at higher than 50% rate. Okay? So if it looks like you're being too attentive, we're going to let you know. Okay? So 50%, 1 minute, favorite holiday or favorite Christmas tradition. Figure out who's A, figure out who's B. A is going to talk to B. Ready, go. Too much eye contact. Don't look. Too much eye contact. All right.
You gotta give her.
Okay. Sarah, all right. Sarah cut. So let's talk about that experience for a moment. What did that feel like to have somebody listening to you at 50%? What was that like?
I can say something about my neighbor. When I was talking about Christmas, he was looking my hair or whatever. When I talk about, you. So he was like that.
You did a good job of being distracted. Good job, Tim. All right. What? Anyone else?
Here we go.
I felt foolish talking. You know, why continue talking if you're not listening?
So was it hard to get your thoughts out as the talker?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So the listener has some power, right? Interesting. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Now let's think about this. I want you to think about, we're going to jump shift for a moment. B is going to talk to A, and you're going to listen to them talk about a favorite mentor in the faith. So somebody who's been a mentor for you in your walk, in your faith walk. And B is going to talk to A, and A, you get to listen at 100%. So so B gets to talk to A 100%. You all can work on that. Is Sarah ready in the back, hopefully? Sarah's ready? Okay, on your marks, get set. 1 minute to talk about that. Ready to go.
People,
Good.
go back and tell her, and she'll have to type it, and she can broadcast it to everybody. But it's pretty seconds. Great.
All right. We let you go a few seconds over there. It's a little harder to end it, isn't it? The first time you're like looking at the, is this thing gonna end? They're still gonna go for a minute. We'll let them go for 30 more seconds.
So then it's 2 minutes. Then just.
Okay.
I'll go.
I'm new to this technology. I apologize.
I'm trying to help.
So how was that? What was that like? Was that a little bit better? Yeah? That feel good? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna challenge you one more time now. And what we're gonna do is we're going to dial in at 110%, if that's really a thing, which I guess mathematically it's not supposedly a thing. But what we're gonna do is, what I want you to think about, the most holy conversation you've ever had in your life. That puts a lot of pressure on it. Think of a holy conversation. Think about a time when you've all done it before. When the bell jar comes down and it's just you and that person in that restaurant, and time and space stand still, and you like believe that God was in that space at the end of that conversation. I want you to try to bring that kind of an awareness to this next conversation. I want you to bring that same intention. I want you to imagine as if this next conversation that you're about to have for a minute is the most important conversation you could ever have. That it's the most important conversation you could possibly have. You want to know why? Because it is the most important conversation you could have. Otherwise, I mean, what conversation is more important than the one you're in? And if there's one that's more important, then be in that one. Don't be in this one. But bring your intention, bring your presence to this next conversation for 1 minute, and imagine as if God might even speak to you through this person next to you. How would you show up if you knew that Jesus was present in the room with you? What kind of intention would you bring? What kind of expectation would you bring to that conversation? And we're going to do that for a minute, and this time A gets to talk again to B, and you're going to talk about a time when you felt God's presence in your life, something that felt like a deep sense of God being present. And if you're having trouble with that, you can also talk about a time when you felt God's absence as well. You can do either one. All right, so you're going to get 1 minute-ish to do this and really lock in. Like I said, bring that intention. Even just say a quick little prayer that God might teach you something through this next minute that you're about to have with this person. All right? Give it a shot. Here we go. On your marks, get set, go.
Straight out of high school.
We're going to extend it a little bit longer, 30 more seconds. All right. It's harder to cut you off. That's good. So, what was that like for you all? What did you notice about the differences or what happened? Just hit it once, the green button.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I would say it was really nice when you first said what we were going to be doing. I was like immediately intimidated, and then we were like, "Hey, has to talk," and I was like, "Man, why?" But I was surprised how naturally it came, and I think it was because of how present Jen was being in that space. That it really didn't feel uncomfortable to talk about something that was so personal. Even though we know each other, but we're not like best friends, so it was really nice.
So I believe it's is it Rabbi Michael Lerner who talks about listening people into free speech, you know, and how important, how the power.
It is Pat Kiefer, Mom.
Okay, so Kiefer quotes it, yeah. So that ability that the power that the listener has to elicit this, you know, confidence in you that I can speak and I can do that. It's amazing what that can do when you show up, right? So, and we're not trying to give you technical skills of like, okay, use eye contact, use, you know, nod knowingly. I mean, we can give you that stuff, but what we're talking about are these adaptive skills that go much deeper than that. So cool. We're going to go through some of these adaptive skills. You're going to hear some echoes of the things that Terry already talked about. But okay, why is this freezing on me again? Come on, work with me.
The online people.
I'm going to hit this button here.
The online people said it's hard to do sacred listening when there's a timer.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, there was an actual timer?
Well, no, it
Yeah.
just says you got 30 more seconds and we're
Right,
cutting
right.
you off, so.
Oh, yeah, that's tough.
So anyway, we're just acknowledging that the online people were trying hard, even though.
Okay. Thank you for trying. This thing is now frozen, but
Let's see.
but the first adaptive skill is called engagement, and so it's part of what we just try to do is how do I show up in a room and bring the presence. So my great grandfather was a bishop in Virginia, and there are all these legendary stories about him. He was a character, but one of the things that he used to serve as a judge because he was good friends with the judge, and that was back when pastors had high esteem, and you know, and so he said, "I want you to sit on my bench." So he would sit on the bench, and he would give these non-traditional sentences to people. So there was a couple that was in for a domestic dispute, and he sentenced them to 30 days without talking to each other. Was it 30 days or was it a week? I don't remember. But there was a young man who had come in who had stolen watches, and he would not confess. And they kept trying to get him to confess. The judge says, my great-grandfather says, "I sentence you to 4 straight weekends of fishing with me." And so he goes out with this guy, and okay, it's working. So he goes out with this kid, you know, and they go out fishing and they, you know, catch some fish, whatever, and they go back in. He doesn't say, they say like very little to each other. Go out the second week, you know, nothing's happening. They're just hanging out, being together. They come back in. Go out the third week. A couple words are said, not much. 4th week, they go out. They're just spending time fishing together, not saying much. And they're coming home. They're putting everything away, you know, putting the tackle box away. And the guy says, "Judge," because he called him Judge. He said, "Judge, I stole those watches." and apparently like the floodgates kind of opened at that point, and the kid was like basically crying in my great-grandfather's arms. It was just that powerful presence that he had to just show up and be present. And so that's what engagement is about. And that's what we want you to do. Like wherever you end up in Christian public leadership is to be able to show up and to embody God's spirit wherever you go. Wow, did it freeze again? This is cool though. This one? This is great. We can work with this. Absolutely. So then the second adaptive skill is relationship to authority. And so if you all, you all are now a couple months into your CPL site, but there may be a tendency for some of you, maybe, hopefully not, to come in guns blazing, tell your supervisor and your mentor what they need to be doing, kind of shooting your mouth off about all the things they're doing wrong in the church. That is a lack of situational awareness, right? And so it's really important to understand this. And, Jesus even understood his relationship to authority. There were times, he was a Torah observing Jew. I mean, so when he heals the Samaritan lepers, right? He says, go show yourself to the priest, right? Like he honored and respected those boundaries as long as they weren't like violating, God's spirit of love and justice. He was all about it. And so this idea that we would understand this, the idea that we would understand both public and private relationships. If any of you have done the week-long training, there's a faith-based organizing group called Gamaliel, and they say that the point of a public relationship is to build power to accomplish the task. So if we're working on a campaign together, we're going to build power together. We're going to create change. It's going to be awesome. If I'm in a congregation, we're going to build power together through the power of the Holy Spirit so that we can, enact change in the world. The point is not the private relationship, which is to give and receive love. So, and these are not supposed to, if you're trying to get love from a public relationship, you're always going to be disappointed, right? And this is what happens to public figures all the time. They're like, oh, I got all these friends. This is great. I'm getting all this love. This is awesome. It's like, that's not actual, like, show up for you love, right? That's called power. There's a power in difference. There's a power difference there. There's an imbalance. And some of us don't want to acknowledge that, and that gets us in trouble. Anybody know any situations about powerful people who wanted to ignore their dynamics and maybe got in a little trouble? Any situations of that recently at all? Probably not. I don't know. There's also folks who you're in this wonderful, loving relationship, and then they try to pull a power move on you. And I don't want to pick on anybody, but I did have a friend who got into this marketing scheme and we had this great friendship, and then all of a sudden it just felt really manipulative. He wouldn't leave me alone until I would go to his, I hope nobody here sells vitamins because it's an okay way to make a living, but he was really working hard on me. This feels weird. This doesn't feel right for you to try to take advantage of our love. So that's public and private. That was a long way to explain that. Then the availability of affect. So this is a really important thing. This is not saying that we're all emotionally calibrated the same way and we're all going to have the same level of expression of emotion. That's not what it is. But there is an accessibility to emotions that is sort of what we would consider a normal level. So joy, sadness, anger, these are all things that are expressed. Now there's gradations of it, and we learn what those are, but it's important that we have those, and not just to have them ourselves, but to recognize them in others as well. So there's some folks who, I had a friend growing up who he didn't have access to his own emotions, and so part of his therapy was being able to identify, okay, point to the smiley face, point to the angry face. That was the tool that was used in order for him to try to get in touch with what his emotions were, because he couldn't identify what they were. So that's part of that. Receiving feedback, being able to see feedback as a gift. It's not working. No, it's all good. I can do it this way. Being able to receive feedback from others and seeing it as, oh, this conversation is actually going to help me see myself, others, God, and the world more clearly. It's not an attack on my own personhood. This one is hard. Can we be honest? Who loves to get like feedback, constructive criticism? Who just thinks that's amazing to get? I'm working my way up to this, but it's hard. It's still hard for me. My ego has trouble with it sometimes. But this is a really important thing. Some people would argue, depending on how you interpret the Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman or the Canaanite woman, some people interpret this as Jesus modeling, a reflective leader who's willing to learn and grow. If you know that story, he's like, yo, what's up? What you doing, woman? He doesn't quite say that, but he's basically like, kind of according to some people's interpretation, kind of gives her a little bit of a, yo, what are you doing here? And then she gives this like masterful comeback of like, yo, even the dogs get the scraps. So, and he's like, oh, yeah, good point. Your faith has made you. Okay. So some people say that that's Jesus modeling a teachable spirit. Other people say that he's actually, it's like a setup. He's just like speaking this thing, knowing the answer. Anyway, however you interpret it, I think it's interesting to think of Jesus as being a teachable leader, that he was reflective and willing to maybe receive some feedback as well. And then giving feedback. There's some of us who withhold really important feedback for others because we like to be liked and we don't want to make it uncomfortable. And so we shy away from that. Or we give it in a real sideways type of fashion. And some of y'all know about that. It's like, oh yeah, you're late for this meeting, huh? Oh, funny. That kind of passive aggressive sideways thing, instead of, hey, I'm having trouble with you being late for meetings every time. We need to talk about this. Just real clean. Keep it real clean. The capacity of self-correction. This is another thing similar to the receiving feedback. But so once you get the feedback, what do you do with it? Are you able to be reflective enough to have new action? That's another thing. So there is actually, with this skills checklist, there's actually like a rating system that you all could do.
It'll be in the PowerPoint.
It'll be in the PowerPoint that's already up. It's on the PowerPoint, so check it out. It'll have more of the details, and we encourage you to go through it and maybe give yourself a grade and see what happens. So then there's self-esteem, and this was already talked about in the EQ book, but the accuracy of self-concept. So the word humility in Greek can be translated as having an accurate self-concept. And we've taken humility to mean like, oh, I'm horrible. Oh, I'm ugly. Oh, I can't preach. That's not what humility is. Humility is to say, I have gifts, but I know where the gifts come from. I don't have these narcissistic delusions, and I don't have these, self-loathing stories that I tell myself. I have an accurate self-concept. Then self-esteem in adapting to fluctuations. So folks whose own sense of self is not threatened by, transition or adversity. That's another thing that's really important with this. Awareness of impact on others. A lot of times we project onto others what we want to project. So our intent and our impact are two different things, and learning about that more and more is really, really important. So how we land on others, and we start to learn cues on how to do that. It's a lifelong journey, because sometimes we're going to have an impact that we didn't want. And so tending to that is really important. Then congruence and authenticity. How do we allow ourselves to come, our best selves to come forward? So have you ever heard like preachers who are just, you're like, okay, you just flipped the switch and this doesn't feel like your real self coming forward here. And now, congregation, please turn to chapter 3. You know what I'm talking about? I had a friend in college, and my friend in college, he's like, hey, what's up, man? Let's say a little prayer. You know, he's just like this Midwestern guy. Or he was probably like, oh yeah, we're gonna say a little prayer and all. How about we say a little prayer? And then he would say, dear Jesus, heavenly Lord, we thank you, Lord. And all of a sudden he like would morph into this like Southern Baptist preacher, which was okay, but I'm like, is this like when you're just sitting in your own room, is this how you speak to God, or is this some kind of a performative thing that's happening? So just being aware of that, I think, is really important. Heck, do you all know, like, you all have stories of people that maybe don't feel authentic when they're presenting something? Yeah. This is like actually harder than it sounds, right? Because if you're like me, you wanna kind of look the part and sound the part, and so you've seen what you've seen out there from, well, most preachers, this is what they do, so this is what I'm supposed to do. It's really hard to remember that I can have my own style in this. So something to think about. And then shadow awareness. So again, we talked about this before, but I mean, if I had $1 for every leader that was not aware of their shadow, that was, you know, they say if you don't feed the wolf eats you, right? So people that were not feeding their wolf, that weren't tending to whatever their, you know, desire was, and were totally oblivious to that. We have to get in touch with our capacity for things that are not wonderful, like whatever those things are that can get us. So Tony Campolo tells a story about being, you know, Tony is married for what, 60 years, however long. It's like 2 a.m. one time, and he gets a phone call. He's like, hello? You know, he's like, hello. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, sleeping. It was one of his best friends. He said, who's there with you? He's like, you know, he's in the hotel. He's like, no one. And his friend was like, good, that's how it should be. Click. But having accountability partners.
I don't think I'd like that friend. I could get it. But.
Well, you know, he's looking out for him. But having friends that hold us to the standard that we want to be held to, you know, and it's not them imposing their standards onto us. It's saying, when I'm at my best, when I'm plugged into the Spirit and grounded in my own identity, this is how I behave, and this is how I want to behave. Can you help me do that? And having people who will help you do that. But if we're not aware of that, we can, I mean, you all know plenty of this, whether it's like ego that takes over, or greed, or we know all the things that happen, right? You all have a couple stories of this from Christian public leaders? Maybe? Yes? No? Yes? Yeah? Unfortunately, I think we probably all have stories. Any questions or comments about this before I hand it off to my man? No? Take the assessment online, and keep thinking about these things, because they're important. There's a book that I want to recommend. So we actually, Terry didn't know this, but there's a guy, Roy Oswald, who wrote a book called The Emotional Intelligence of Jesus. What she didn't know is that I was just Facebooking with Roy last night, because we're just besties, and he's in the Bahamas right now. However, he wants to interact somehow with the class, because he's one of the gurus for this for this movement. Your optional reading is him. So So anyway, he would be potentially a resource for you all that want to go deeper with EQ. So if that's something that you want to keep exploring, have your people talk to our people, and we'll keep doing it. Okay, we'll talk about paper real quick before Tim comes up. So there is the reflective assessment. That's my department, remember? So we call it the contextual assessment. So the contextual assessment is going to be filled out with your mentor this week at the latest, right? Because it's due the 15th. So set that meeting up if you haven't yet already. Start doing that reflective work. You're going to just look at the year or the semester. There may be things that didn't happen like you wanted them to. That's okay. We talked about the capacity for self-correction. That's great. Like, look at what worked, what didn't. And then you'll go through it together. Some people ask about January, the month of January. Our hope is that a lot of you will continue to be engaged during the month of January in your context. For those of you who that's a possibility, it's not a credit-bearing thing, but I think that's part of the expectation, especially for folks who are, doing a youth ministry gig, especially, that you're not just going to like abandon the kids for the month of January, but that you'll continue to work with them. So, any other questions about your contextual stuff? Not the other final paper, but the contextual assessment. People feel like they have a handle on it. You know where it is on the course page. You found it. Good. All right. Sweet. And now, ladies and gentlemen, batting cleanup.
Wow.
In the other blue jacket, Mr. Tim Colvett.
Terry, did you want to say anything else about the final paper? Are we good?
You should have got an email. Look at your rubric. That's exactly what Tim and I will be doing the final paper. Include readings, include what you've learned about yourself as a Christian public leader and where your growth areas and some things like that. So it's just attend to those things, theologically, theoretically, readings.
Can I say one more thing? Because somebody asked a question online. They wondered when our precept papers will be graded. And what I can tell you about
Not before your stuff is due.
what I can tell you about the reflective assessment is that if you don't get the reflective assessment in on the due date, I will not be able to give you feedback. That's honoring my time. So, and probably I don't know if that's your policy too. So you could if you hand it in late, you can potentially still pass. But if you want to receive feedback, which is part of why you're in seminary, is to receive that, then you need to get it in on time. Is that fair? And then we'll honor your time, you honor our time. Sweet.
All right, thanks, Dave. We kind of flipped the script today and wanted to end with a portion of scripture to just dwell in together and to actually try on this filter that Roy Oswald set out to do in his book, The Emotional Intelligence of Jesus, where he lifted up texts like the woman caught in adultery and how Jesus de-escalated that moment. If you read that chapter, you'll see other biblical passages that are highlighted. And one of the passages that I thought of and would like us to just lend our attention and our spirit to here in these closing moments of class today is the beginning of Job's many sufferings in Job chapter 2. And the coming together of friends and just what we might learn about emotional intelligence. And I'm going to have you, those of you who are online, we're going to break off into a brief discussion. But we'd like to read this a couple of times first, and I'm wondering if I might have a female voice and a male voice to read this 2 times with about 60 seconds of silence in between. Could I have 2 volunteers that would be willing to do so? Great.
So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a potsherd with which to scrape himself and sat among the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great.
So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a potsherd with which to scrape himself and sat among the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die." And he said to her, "You speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive the good of the Lord, but not the bad?" And all this Job did not sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great.
The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I'd like you to turn to somebody near you and share with them how emotional intelligence showed up in this text, or maybe didn't show up in some of the exchanges that you heard. Just turn to somebody for a couple of minutes here and share with them how you saw emotional intelligence show up in this text.
Sorry about that.
Yes, but I also know enough about myself. Yeah, exactly. I'm not loving jokes, but you know.
Well, his whole comment is like, he's giving like true yeah. You have the ability to move that window a little bit so you can see it. Sweep them out. I had such a great presentation.
All right, the next 20 seconds we'll come back together to wrap up. All right, let's tap some of the wisdom in the room in terms of where you saw emotional intelligence showing up. Anybody?
We talked about the power of the reaction of the friends. We also talked about the power of the silence of the friends. That sometimes presence is what's most important, not our need to try to help or solve the situation, make everything better. And we talked about too the rawness of the wife and her just wanting it to stop out of, I think, pure love of her husband, and saying, just make it stop, just stop it. That's all you have to do.
At least she like,
was powerful.
If you have a pastoral care class with Carla Dahl, she'll talk about the friend showing up and bringing a hot dish, right? That's all they did. And they sat there for 7 days. Any other things that surfaced for you, Stanley?
Looking at two different ways. Of course, the wife's reaction, from her perspective, being that close to the situation, and we lost everything. You're not looking good. She didn't put any filter. She just let her emotions come out, and Joe responded, basically checking her on it. And so she didn't have any filters, came out with her feelings the way she was at that time. Whereas the friends, they hadn't been around, hadn't seen him for a while, and they come and looking at this and said, "What is going on with you? This isn't good." And so they withheld any opinions, and they reacted a different way, just kind of sat with him for 7 days, didn't say anything. So.
Any other responses?
Yes. I'm sure I want to agree with the brother back there that said concerning the woman. I think she was expressing just agreed. But I would go further to say that Joe's reaction to her was not quite what I expected. Sometimes when our loved ones are in situations as such, we say, just do this so that it can happen. I mean, I don't want to see you suffer anymore. But then Joe came back and said, "Oh, you foolish woman. whatever that he said. It was not that she wanted to disrespect God, but she wanted the pain to stop.
There is empathy all over this text, and his wife being human, and his friends being human, and we've had a veteran pastor come and do some things with internship orientation in the past, and one of her mantras was her number one job is to show up and shut up, and that's what she's learned over 20 years of ordained ministry. And just how hard that is. What is that impulse within us? What is that anxiety that makes us want to say something? And if you read on in Job, you start to see that kind of thing of, well, you must have done something wrong. I mean, you start thinking. And sometimes it's about showing up. 90% of ministry, showing up. And we count on God. Let's close with a word of prayer. We do thank you, God, for the many gifts that you have given to us. We are amazed and mystified at the gifts of feeling and emotion. We are amazed and mystified at who you are, how you stir in this world, and how you have called each person here. We pray, Lord, that you would be with each of us as we come to the close of this semester, that the things that need to get done will be getting done. That you will give the energy, the strength, the capacities. And most of all this day, we pray that you would help us to learn how to show up, how to listen, how to truly be present for one another and for this world that you love. We pray this today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Tim, tell about the hymn sing.
Hey, there's a hymn sing. Apparently, Martin Luther and John Wesley and Pope John Paul all said that when you sing, you pray. How does he say?
Pray twice.
When you sing, you pray
When
twice.
when you sing, you pray twice. Dave told me that everybody quotes all of their different leaders in their church. We've talked a lot about Martin Luther saying that. There's an Advent hymn sing going on in chapel. Professor Ralph Jacobson said, "Come one, come all." And if you want to go sing your lungs out, please do so.